What if I told you that the history of Venezuela started with a quest for gold? Let's dig deeper into this fascinating journey. In the 16th century, the Spanish, in their thirst for wealth and exploration, set foot on the land that is now known as Venezuela. The allure of gold drew them to this region, sparking a gold rush that would define the early years of colonization. The indigenous people, with their rich cultures and traditions, were confronted with a new reality as their lands were seized and their lives altered. The Spanish, with their superior weaponry and insatiable greed for gold, dominated the landscape. Mines sprung up across the region as the Spanish dug deep into the earth, extracting every ounce of the precious metal they could find. But as the years passed, the once abundant gold mines began to deplete. The Spanish, realizing that the gold rush was coming to an end, turned their attention to another resource: agriculture. The fertile lands of Venezuela, blessed with a tropical climate, proved to be perfect for the cultivation of crops. And so, the focus shifted from mining to farming. Under the Spanish crown, Venezuela transformed into an agricultural hub, producing crops like cacao, coffee, and indigo that were highly prized in the European markets. This agricultural boom would continue until the early 19th century, marking a significant period in the history of Venezuela. But as with all colonial stories, this one too was marred by exploitation and inequality. The Spanish colonial masters, in their pursuit of wealth, subjected the indigenous people and imported African slaves to harsh conditions and forced labor. This period of Spanish colonial control was characterized by a complex interplay of power, resistance, and adaptation. As the gold lost its luster, a new era dawned, shifting the focus from mining to agriculture. The colonial period laid the foundation for the Venezuela we know today, a country rich in history and culture, shaped by centuries of colonial influence and the enduring spirit of its people. What does it take to win freedom? For Venezuela, it was a battle led by some of the most iconic figures in history. The struggle for independence was a journey paved with resilience, hope, and an unwavering belief in the promise of liberty. In the early 19th century, Latin American colonies were chafing under the yoke of Spanish colonial rule. Venezuela was no exception. The seeds of rebellion were sown and watered by the likes of Simon Bolivar and Francisco de Miranda, men who dared to dream of a future where their homeland was no longer shackled by foreign powers. Bolivar, often referred to as El Libertador, or the Liberator, played a pivotal role in the fight for independence. His vision, his charisma, and his military prowess galvanized the people, inspiring them to rise against their oppressors. In 1811, the Declaration of Independence was signed, a symbolic act of defiance against the Spanish crown. Yet the road to freedom was far from smooth. The ensuing years were marked by conflict and instability, as the Spanish fought relentlessly to regain control. Venezuela was caught in the throes of a brutal war, a relentless struggle between the forces of subjugation and the aspirations of the people. Yet the flame of independence, once lit, could not be extinguished. After a decade-long struggle, Bolivar and his forces finally managed to liberate Venezuela in 1821. The country was integrated into Gran Colombia, an ephemeral union that also included Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama. This was a significant moment, not just for Venezuela, but for all of Latin America. It was a testament to the power of collective action, to the indomitable spirit of a people determined to chart their own destiny. And so a new chapter was written in the history of Venezuela, one of independence and unity. A chapter that serves as a reminder of the sacrifices made, the battles fought, and the triumphant spirit of a nation that refused to bow down to colonial rule. From gold to black gold, Venezuela's wealth lies beneath its surface. Digging deeper into Venezuela's story, we find ourselves amidst the vast oil reserves, primarily located in the Orinoco region. This South American nation is truly a land of oil giants, boasting one of the largest oil reserves in the world. Oil exploration in Venezuela began in the early 20th century. The black gold quickly became the lifeblood of the nation's economy, shaping its rise and fall on the world stage. The oil boom brought unprecedented wealth, transforming Venezuela into one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America. With the revenue generated from oil exports, infrastructure flourished, cities expanded, and living standards soared. But as the saying goes, not all that glitters is gold. The same oil that fueled Venezuela's prosperity also became its Achilles heel. With the discovery of oil, Venezuela's fortunes seemed to be on the rise, but little did they know a bumpy ride was ahead. Can a country rich in oil face economic challenges? The answer, as seen in Venezuela, is a resounding yes. Despite boasting one of the world's largest oil reserves, Venezuela, unfortunately, serves as a prime example of how natural wealth doesn't always equate to economic prosperity. You see, the nation's over-reliance on oil as its primary source of revenue has left its economy vulnerable to the whims of international oil prices. When these prices fluctuate, as they so often do, the Venezuelan economy feels the impact directly. But that's not the whole story. The country's economic decline can't solely be pinned on its oil dependency. No, there's more to it than that. Poor economic policies have also played a significant role in the nation's financial downfall. Mismanagement of funds, lack of investment in other sectors, and an inability to diversify the economy have all combined to put Venezuela in a precarious economic position. Now let's add corruption into the mix. Rampant and systemic corruption has further exacerbated the situation, draining the nation's resources and stifling economic growth. It's a vicious cycle that only feeds into the instability and economic hardship faced by the population. Speaking of instability, let's not forget the impact of political turmoil. Political instability has been a constant backdrop to Venezuela's economic decline, creating an environment of uncertainty that discourages both local and foreign investment. It's a case of politics and economics being inextricably linked, each influencing and being influenced by the other. The result of all these factors, a persistent economic crisis that has led to hyperinflation, scarcity of basic goods, and a sharp drop in the standard of living for the Venezuelan people. It's a sobering example of how a country rich in natural resources can still face significant economic challenges. So, as the oil wells flowed, so did the economy spiral, leading to a paradox of plenty. The Venezuelan economic decline is a stark reminder that wealth and resources does not guarantee economic stability or prosperity. It's a complex issue, with no easy solutions, but one that we must strive to understand if we are to learn from history and avoid repeating the same mistakes. What happens when a nation's politics become a global debate? Welcome to the intricate political scenario of Venezuela. Venezuela's political landscape is as rich and complex as its history, a tumultuous tapestry woven with strands of power, opposition, and international scrutiny. The last few decades have been particularly volatile, with the nation often finding itself on the global stage, not for its oil reserves, but for its political tussles. At the helm of this political maelstrom is the government led by Nicolas Maduro. Ascending to power following the death of predecessor Hugo Chavez, Maduro's tenure has been marred by intense criticism from both within and outside Venezuela. His administration has faced accusations of human rights abuses, a lack of transparency, and the suppression of opposition voices. Human rights, a cornerstone of any democratic society, have been a major point of contention. Reports of arbitrary detentions, excessive use of force, and even torture have sparked outrage and concern on a global scale. The Maduro administration's response to these allegations has done little to quell the rising tide of criticism. The issue of transparency, too, has been a thorn in the side of Maduro's government. Questions have been raised about the integrity of electoral processes, the independence of the judiciary, and the overall functioning of the government. These concerns, coupled with allegations of corruption, have further fueled the fire of political unrest. Perhaps the most defining feature of Venezuela's current political scenario is the suppression of opposition. Opposition leaders have faced detention, exile, or worse, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty. This in turn has led to widespread protests and demonstrations, further destabilizing the nation. In this intricate web of power, opposition, and international scrutiny, What is clear is that the political scenario in Venezuela is far from resolved. With each new day, the struggle for control continues, shaping the destiny of this resource-rich nation. In the power corridors of Venezuela, the struggle for control continues, shaping the nation's destiny. Is investing in a country with vast oil reserves a good idea? Not always, as the case of Venezuela shows. The country's substantial economic and political instability presents significant risks to investors. The uncertainty surrounding government policies can make it difficult to predict the future and to plan accordingly. Economic volatility, largely due to the country's over-reliance on oil revenue, further complicates the investment landscape. Additionally, concerns over the rule of law make it challenging to ensure that investments will be protected and that disputes can be resolved fairly and efficiently. It's clear that despite its rich oil reserves, investing in Venezuela is not a decision to be taken lightly. It requires a deep understanding of the country's complex economic and political situation, as well as a high tolerance for risk. In the game of risk and return, Venezuela seems to be a high-stakes gamble.